schedule. Let's try to like respect the schedule. Okay, so we're going to go into, it's not easy to grasp everything and get to everything in 30 minutes, but hopefully the viewers will be able to get a general idea, and probably a lot of questions will emerge. I will try to save some time for Q&A, but right away to tell you, it's not, I'm not going to be able to go into details right now. So we need to, these questions are not so easy to answer. So we'll have to do special designated niche seminars, or we're going to have to sort that out individually. But I hope that people that are wondering about these topics will get a general role and then maybe know how to go and find out some more answers for themselves. So if we manage to do this, this will already be good and beneficial to athletes. So when talking about form, it's very, and general planning, it's very hard to do that if we don't go back to some basics. So we are going to, so that you don't have to look at my boring face, we're going to do some demos in the background that I recorded so I can use them. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully this will work. This. Okay, maybe it's going to work more smooth or less smooth for people, but let's go. I'm going to speak at a maybe a little bit higher pace. So let's see how it goes. Alisa, if you see that the things is jammed like it was last time, you will let me know. Okay, so in order to go into general training and how things work when we're underwater, we need to know that there are different types of physical skills and different energy resources we have in the body. When I say physical skill, you can put there general stamina, endurance, aerobic endurance, power endurance, strength, flexibility, speed, power, speed endurance, coordination, agility, accuracy, balance, hand-eye coordination, speed of reaction. Those are all physical skills. Some are more basic, some are more advanced, some are complex, some are simple. But in every sport, there is a certain percentage of each of those skills. They all play a role, and when we are building those skills, we start ground up. So we will talk about that in the big like yearly plan of how to develop them. For all those skills involved, we have different resources of energy, of course. So the main thing that's been used while we do an exercise are our phosphate reserves. This is ATP and CP, and this is like very few, like maybe five calories in terms of 5 kilocalories in terms of like how many we actually have in various tissues in our body. This is used immediately. The next thing is our carbohydrates that we use, and this is stored in liver as glycogen, in muscle also as glycogen, and in blood as glucose. So here we have another, let's say, around 2,000 kilocalories in our body, and the most of our storage is, of course, in fat. And this is in triglycerides and serum-free fatty acids and muscle fat and adipose tissue. These are huge. This is up to like 100,000 kilocalories. And we can also devour protein. We can break it down and get another 30,000 from that. And how we're going to use this is very much dependent on our body type, body composition, the way we were used to training, and the way that we use tactics in our either freediving or any other sport. So in freediving, what happens is we can use all of those resources. And if a freedive is energetically and tactically successful, we will be able to drain all of those resources and like use all the oxygen that is provided for us in our blood and lungs and muscle tissue, and at the same time be able to burn out as much as sugar we can from our bodies. We're not going to be able to get to using fat with just a single dive. So we're looking just at competition performance, but we can definitely use this when we do longer training session and stuff like this. So also the finesse of skill is dependent on energy. We cannot have power without fast energy, so without the phosphate system of energy. So as this dive is coming to an end, and in order to speed things up, maybe we can speed the dive up. Let's see. Yeah, let's just skip this. So I'm going to skip this so I can show you another one. So this is 200, I don't know by heart now, but this is around 210, I think. And this dive is done in, I think, around 5 minutes 30, 5 minutes 40, something like this. And now I'm going to show you the same discipline. So it's again DNF in a 25-meter pool. And this dive is going to be energetically completely different. This is a dive that's going to be longer for around 30, 35 meters. So it's going to be a 240 dive, but it's going to be, I think, more than 1 minute shorter in time. So it's a completely different energy use, completely different tactics, and also different training for these dives, different physical skills involved and stuff like that. So while we're on to this, I've had some questions concerning how do we measure stuff, and a lot of questions, and a few of them after the last seminar were about VO2 max and lactate thresholds. So let's go into that a little bit and try to clarify it for people. And some people that were on my seminars, they asked me later on when we took lactate, so do I know my lactate threshold now? No, you don't. Like, to do this, we need to go through a specific regime, and this is at least 1 hour of blood samples in order to determine the real lactic threshold. So VO2 max, that's the maximal volume of oxygen that your body can deliver to the muscle cell when it's in effort, when it's working. It's dependent on how much can you inhale in a minute, how much can you pump out of your blood in a minute, and when the blood goes through the muscle, how much the muscle can absorb. And this is definitely something that tells you how much you're trained, but also it's mostly used in aerobic and endurance sports. And this on its own doesn't provide you with a performance number, because for the performance number, you need to have your lactate threshold. And lactate threshold, that's a point where your lactates start to accumulate in your blood more than you can dissolve them and get them out of your blood. So up to the point where you reach the lactate threshold, that intensity of the exercise you can sustain for a longer period of time using your fat. So when you're training, and when you're training for longer periods of time, that's when you're using fat and you're below the lactate threshold. Once you pass the threshold, then if you are around that with your heart rate or however you determine the intensity of your training, you're like in the red zone, and it's not possible to get back in the same training session. You will be in the red zone. And then if you're working on moving the threshold, then you want to stay there. And if you're working on lactate tolerance, or you're trying to build resistance to lactate, then you go higher up and see how much you can take, or there are many ways of doing this and performing. In order to be a successful athlete and a successful freediver as well, you need to develop all these stages and work on all of them. the advantage of having a high threshold is that you can endure a very intensive exercise much higher up on your intensity scale and not get too much lactate, so you need to stop the exercise, because when you're building up lactates, at one point you will need to drop down your intensity. So if you're using watches and training these things, you need to train like all the zones, all the regions, in my opinion, in order to be successful at freediving. Okay, so this one is also about to finish. So, okay, this one is now finished. And as you can see, these dives were completely different in terms of time, in terms of energy. And this shows that you can use a lot of different resources during a single free dive. And training them and finding your sweet spot is something that you will be focused on, and it's not going to be that easy to find if you are looking for top performance for your body. And then tweaking in the next season will get you even better results if you realize, like, what do you miss, what skill do you miss. And in order to do that, it's very hard to do it on your own, but when I do it with athletes, I take heart rates and saturations and blood samples and various points on the dive, and then we can determine exactly what is missing and exactly what we can work on. If technique can be improved, that is the first thing to improve, of course, because you don't do yourself a favor if you're working on, let's say, muscle hypertrophy or something like that, if your technique is not right, because then the bigger, stronger muscles learns things wrong, and you will never get as efficient as you could be if you learned the technique right from the first time. So that's a point to take for many people, that this is like a shortcut. It's much easier to get stronger, to get more oxygen, to get more glycogen, to get more phosphates. This is easy, but it only takes you so much, and good technique will take you further always, especially in freediving, where, in my opinion, we haven't reached the limit of human potential. I think in the future we will see much better results, and this is going to be because of better technique mostly, and because freediving up to now was quite a recreational sport. And I think when athletes that are properly prepared come to freediving, that we will see a whole new set of results and breaking records. But in order to do this, of course, they need to be motivated with exposure, with financial support, stuff like that. So we're not football. If we were football, I promise you, like, the results would already be doubled. Okay, so with that being said, let's move on and try to stick to our time frame. So I'm going to share a whiteboard now. Okay. Okay, hopefully this looks nice. Okay, so when we were speaking about energy, we should have in mind that not all energy, like, maybe it's easier. There are several ways to do this graphically. So if we say that this is time and this is let's say maximum energy production or intensity or stuff like that, then if we are using our pure ATP stores, so the most immediate energy, it's like this, and this is like a 2-second, we have a 2-second margin for this. Then our CP reserves come in, and the ATP we can like influence some, but the CP we can influence a lot more. So this would be the CP curve. It's still in seconds, but why is this important in freediving? Because this is a purely anaerobic source. So you don't need any oxygen. This only creates oxygen depth. And because freediving is not a very explosive exercise, if your body gets used and has enough phosphates and gets used to using them, then you can use these and you can get a lot of things done just with these. There's also like the videos we've seen that are completely different. Apparently different type of contraction was used in both of them. And this is what you can see. For example, you have online on YouTube, you have Goran Čolak's bifin world record dive from 2 years ago. I think it was around 255. He was the first man to turn 250. And I think his dive is almost between 4.5 and 5 minutes, something like that. And then last year I break that record and I go 10 meters further and I do it in 3:30, around 3:30, something like that. If you want to check the dive, you have it on my YouTube channel. So again, this is a completely different set of energy and tactics being used for these types of diving. And in order for me to perform dives like this, I need this part to be extremely well trained. And this is what I tend to train in other freedivers as well. Then we have the lactic acid system, which kind of wakes up a little bit slower, but then can last a little bit longer. And here we are talking about, let's say, 5 minutes with very, very highly trained individuals. But when you're on dry, this type of energy is never on its own, because also the aerobic system and fat burning also starts, but it's just slow. It takes some time to build up. So when it comes, but then when it comes to its peak here, you can sustain it for a longer period of time. And this can go on like for hours and hours and hours. You have people there, ultra runners, that can do this for ages. So yeah, your overall performance, if you start with a burst, is like this. But if you are in a free dive, you want to balance this out. And this is something that's more as tactical stuff. So this is what you do with your coach or whoever, and figure out a way to improve your tactics and figure out a way, like, what is the best way to dive for you. Okay, so with that being said, there are different types of drills to go. We said what are the physical skills and the energy behind it. And in order to train all of those skills to get all the energy, you need to know how to train it, and what are you missing, and what do you want to use in your freediving. So in order to start with that, if you have those information, or you have a hunch on, like, people instinctively sometimes know, okay, I'm missing this, I'm missing that. To put it simple, but it's never that simple, but to put it as simple as possible, we can imagine that during a single free dive, we go through different phases. The last phase, when you get hypoxic, is very stressful on your nervous system. And the phases before that, for some people, will be like this. So this could be the comfort phase, and then this could be the struggle phase. But for some people, this will be more like this. The comfort phase will be here, and then the struggle phase here, and then when they struggle a little bit, they just die. And so these are different types of athletes. This athlete will probably use a lot of aerobic resources, and this one will probably have a lot of anaerobic resources. Because what happens is, when it gets hard, it actually gets more efficient for your body. But in order to, like, be alive, you need to have a lot of energy left, so you can do that. And or you need to be very highly trained and perform at a level of high discomfort. which will eventually come, because it's a sport that at a professional level and performance seeking has the little discomfort phase. Although it's, because this is very stressful for the nervous system, it's very important to progress slowly and don't get into that phase too much. And I know a lot of divers that are getting to nice results just moving their comfort zone gradually. And I think that's the approach that people should take if they want to get into freediving long term. There's always time to burn yourself out. So if you can then manage to grasp what's your type, you will be able to plan your single session better. So in planning a single session, always take the skill that's, maybe we can write this. So first, plan to do intensity, and plan to have your nervous system exposed at the beginning of your single session training. Then after that, do coordination drills. Or this means technique, improving technique. You still need your nervous system to be very responsive in order to do that. At the end of the session, you do stuff that is repetitive. Or if you are on dry training, this is also something where you do aerobic. So you do stuff that are hard at first, and then you break it down to stuff that are more easier to you. But with that being said, have in mind that to develop a certain skill, you need time to absorb the skill neurally, and you need time to rest and have this skill form new synapses and new serotonin waves in your brain and in your muscle memory. So if you are trying to develop all the skills in a single session, that's not going to work, or it's going to work very, very slow, or it's going to be worse. So you can train and get worse and worse at what you do. That's also an option, and it happens a lot. Okay, that's for the single session. Once you have your single session, then you need to figure out how to put this in a microcyclus. A microcyclus is usually a week, and so if you have like a week schedule, let's say these are days of the week, we're just going to like eye it. We don't need to get super strict, and we don't have time for that. So if this is your week, and for every day you decide what you want to develop in your microcyclus. And if you're developing, let's say, phosphates here, you don't want to have another training of phosphates in the same day. So if I'm having that here, I'm going to have it again, let's say here, depending on how high the intensity was. To determine this, it needs some time, and you need a professional in order to get very, very specific with it. But it's also very, very good to just try to feel it. So here, maybe you will have something else. Here you can have some coordination drills or mental training. And then the next day, maybe you can have some aerobic training. And at the same time, this aerobic training can be your active recovery for this. And here you can have some passive recovery. Or if you're in good shape, then here you can also throw in some apnea. And then here you can train your carbohydrates in your body to work better. So your glucose levels, your glycogen levels in muscle and livers with, let's say, with threshold exercises or with tolerance exercises. For these, you will again need to recover, so you put them here. And this is now like a puzzle, and this is something that you work out with experience, and with, like, generally you just with time you get to know your body. And the general rule of thumb here is when you're training a certain skill in the week, in the microcycles, it doesn't have to be a week, it can be 10 days. You want to put the same skills as far apart as possible in order to rest as much as possible to work on them. And in order to know how and why to recover for them, we need to understand the compensation curve. So let's say this is your normal performance level, and you start here. Then when you do your training session, of course, you get weaker. Let's say you do a very big dive. You're not going to be able to do a very big dive right after that. You need some time to recover. So your performance level decreases. But this is good because you wear out your body and your muscles and it decreases. And then your body rebuilds in order to compensate for that. And here you have compensated and come to the same level where you are. Then you get to a positive side of the curve, which is called supercompensation. And this curve will then continue like this until you get to the same period. What you want to do in your training is to hit this peak, because here you are stronger than you were here. And if you do the same training here, you will probably get a curve that's looking like this. And then if you hit it again here, then you get the same results. And this goes on. So if you do this all the time, you get like a linear growth, which is kind of old-fashioned, and you need some rest in order for these curves to work better. This linear growth model is slower. So now in sport we use the wavy form model, and depending on your how well are you trained and what's your general stamina, then this model, the compensation model, can look like this. So you can have your compensation curve like this, but start here and not here. That's also a tactic. And then you have another one, and then you start here. And the lower you get, okay, this is not going to happen. Wait. And for this. So the lower you get, the higher the supercompensation part will be. So this will be a much faster model, but it takes much more experience and it's much more risky, because if you hit this part too low, you get into overtraining and it's very hard to recover from that. And it's also very tricky in freediving because we have a lot of neural damage and our nervous system is in a lot of effort here. So you need to be careful with this in freediving. So when you have your microcycluses figured out, then you put them in a medium cyclus, a mesocyclus. So this can be, let's say, it can be 3 months or 4 months or something like that. And then you have in this big period of, let's say, 3 months, if this is your mesocyclus, you build up your intensity with your microcycluses. The best and safest way, like for most people, is to build them like bricks with intensity. So the intensity grows, and then you take a step back. And then you allow, you're still training, but you take a step back and you allow intensity to grow again. And then from here, you take a step back here and continue to grow it. Okay, understand that? So each time you go a little bit higher. You need this rest period, otherwise you're going linear and it's much harder to get overtrained. And it's much harder actually to progress linear. You reach a plateau very, very soon, and it's stressful for your motivation, your brain, and stuff like that. The mesocycluses form microcycluses or a season. When talking about the whole season, ideally it should be divided into 4 mesocycluses. The first cyclus is recovery from the last cyclus from last season. So the first one is something that you want to avoid freediving. You want to do all other sports as much as possible. So other movement patterns, swimming, water polo, free climbing, hiking, triathlon, like whatever, team sports, ball sports, whatever gets you going, you just do that. You recover your nervous system and your body completely and get into motivated state with yourself. Then you enter the second phase. This is base preparation period. Here is where you build up all those energy resources and all those physical skills we talked about in the beginning of the seminar. And in this phase, you will earn what you will pay off later. Here you start to work a bit more specifically. This is a semi-specific phase, and get more into freediving. This is so where are we now? We don't have access to water, but we can do a lot of things done here. This is the most important part, actually, because this builds foundation for the third mesocyclist. So in the third phase, you want to get specific. And that means getting all of those physical skills that you learn here into the water to a specific element and making new specific skills and movement patterns that are specific for your sport. Here, in this part, it will pay off what you did in the second part. And then at the fourth part, this is the situational part. This is the part where you do competition and your training looks a lot like competition. In terms of intensity and volume, and you always want to play with that in your training, this is where your volume is. So how do we do this? So at this one, at first phase, let's say this is the graph for your volume of training. So the extensity of training is high here, and it gets lower as you approach the competition phase. And this would be in the same time mark. This would be your graph for intensity. So here, you're just playing around. Here, you're building up that intensity. Here, you want the intensity to be moderately high, but here, it's going to be super high. It's important that in these phases, the third and especially the fourth, you have a set of drills that are made specifically to maintain your skills and energy resources that you acquired in the second phase. Because if you don't do that, they have a compensation curve. Like we said, everything has this curve. So if you don't find a way to maintain them somewhere here, they will just drop, and you will get to the competition phase and you will be either tired, or you will not have energy, you will not have this, you will not have that. So you need to find a way to maintain this. This is quite important. It's more important to maintain it than to actually do situational preparation. In that part where you do situational preparations, that's also called a technically tactical part of the season. This is where you want to try out new tactics, and while you do a high intensity exercise, you want to, learn your body how to do it better and how to get better at it. Bigger than microcyclists is usually the Olympic cyclists, and it's the same thing, just 4 times bigger usually, and it's even better. And then it's also focused. You do the same cyclists, but they're again more focused in the first part just to make you a better athlete. Then in the second part, just to get all of your skills better in general, so you would be better at any sport. In the third season, you can target things just to get very specifically good at breath hold, good at water movement. And then in the fourth phase, you want to be really smart and know how to use the resources, know how to get your tactics, know how much things you can do and get done at the competition that you go to, or stuff like that. After this, for every competition in that last phase or in any phase, you need to know how to deload and how to peak your form, how to do your tapering. It's going to be different for static, different for dynamics, different for depth, and it's going to be quite individual. But in general, I would say if you are doubting how much rest, take more. And in freediving, I think this is very good, because freediving is a very mental and neural activity, and you don't want to get to point break at a certain point in your competition. So it's always safer to be more rested than to be more tired. You're not going to learn anything new in the last weeks before the competition. And it's all going to come down to playing with your volume and intensity of the exercise. So when you're tapering, when you want to peak, you deload your volume and you just raise your intensity. Of course, having in mind that you need to recover from each and every drill. And every drill is individual, but in general, there are some general rules of thumb, which you can probably find or ask around. Let's say for lactate exercises, this is usually 48 hours and up, but it can be very different. For example, for flexibility, it's going to be 6 to 8 hours. So you can target different flexibility sessions more frequently than you can target your lactic sessions. And yeah, that being said, we are at 35 minutes. So we are at the end of our seminar. We can take a few questions maybe and finish off.
Cool. Anyone, any questions? I'm checking Facebook. The questions that we received on Instagram, I think you've answered them pretty much.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So Matt is asking, by the way, Matt said that he loves your boring face. How long each cycle is?
Big hello to my friend Matt. So every cycle is as long as you want it to be. So usually, as I said, as a rule of thumb, the microcycles is usually like a week, because it's easy to plan it. A week or 2 weeks. Some do it for 10 days. And then usually the mesocycluses are distributed through the season. So each one is between 2 and 4 months. And the macrocyclus is usually a season. So it's usually a yearly macrocyclus. But for Olympic athletes, is usually 4 years. So this is all, you know, how you do it. This is in 90% of the cases, we're talking about these times.
Cool. We have another question from Anna. How much time you allow for depth adaptation? Hey, Anna.
Again, I would say this is highly individual, because I know like top level athletes like Alexei that are having so much experience and so much depth exposure and such mental awareness that they can adapt very, very quick. But also I know some very, very good and highly ranked like 100+ divers that need 3-4 months to adapt. This again is super highly individual, and for me personally, I never have enough time to adapt for that.
Okay, hopefully this answers your question, Anna. And then we have another one from Alex, who is asking what book you recommend on the subject.
A book. I really have no clue. I would need to like try to Google and then recommend something. It's been like years and years since I've been into any literature regarding this topic.
How about our wave 4?
How about?
Can you our wave 4?
Well, when we finish wave 4,
yes,
I will put a lot of these with very specific stuff into wave 4, because this is actually wave 4 course material.
Yeah,
it's for an athlete. This will be a athlete course, and athlete needs to know how to form his season, how to train, how to eat, and a lot of this will be implemented in the wave 4 manual. So I hope that's going to be very good literature, but let's see.
Cool. And then let's see, we have another question from Matt. One last question. I think he's typing. Cool. Yeah, I'm excited for
Matt is
waveform.
our super talented photographer and Molchanovs Instructor Trainer. I think you've seen some of his seminars, so I hope we see more. Come on, Matt, hurry up. Maybe we have a different question before, Matt.
Okay, we got it. Do you think it is a good strategy to keep working out during the deep phase? Good question.
Of course, yeah, of course, definitely. There is no reason not to. Of course, you need to be smart with it. You're not going to do some serious PBs on weightlifting right before your dive or right after, but of course, you will need to work out.
Okay, and then
I'm not sure, the WOD, that's the CrossFit session stuff. Well, it's depending on what you usually do and what are your exercises to maintain your form. So if you have done weightlifting, for example, then you will do weightlifting exercises to maintain what you have acquired through the basic period of your season, and you will maintain this with respect to rest from deep dives and rest from weightlifting throughout the season. That's the best way to do it. The only way where you're going to actually recover completely from that is in the first phase. That's when you want to get because there are many damages being done, like microfractures to the bones, to the connecting tissue, tendons, ligaments, muscles, and our nervous system that build up, and we're not actually even aware of that. And that's why you need that complete rest phase period. You still are active and working your aerobic capacities, but you need to rest from things that you do.
Okay, cool. We have one last question. How beneficial is flexibility for freediving?
Like in any other sport, if you have any movement restrictions that are not allowing you to perform technically at a high level, then it's good to get into active stretching and try to work that out. If you don't, it's only a matter of your coordination between muscle and coordination within the muscle itself. Every muscle, usually it's never a problem with pure flexibility, like physical flexibility. So every muscle can usually extend up to 40% of the normal resting rate. And that's usually enough for everyone to even do splits. But the problem is we don't really know how to coordinate ourselves to do that. This is something you can learn, and it's more beneficial than just performing actual flexibility. But if you have restrictions, then you do flexibility. And when we're talking about flexibility, there are 8 different types of flexibility and many different workouts to be done. Passive flexibility has never been proven to do anything for sport other than get you more prone to injury. Active flexibility is much better, or dynamic flexibility, because this is something that can actually be used. If flexibility, like I said before, the supercompensation phase for flexibility is 6 to 8 hours individual, but more or less. And so this means you can increase your flexibility very, very rapidly. But if you're not increasing also your stability, so that's all combined into some meaningful mobility, then it's more likely to get injured. And it really doesn't make much sense to have a high passive amplitude of movement, because you're not going to be able to use it in sport. You can use it for photos, I guess that's it, and nothing else. If you want to train it for sport, you need to train it in a different way, definitely. Flexibility, generally, if you want to increase your range of motion, you need to designate sessions specifically for flexibility. When you do a little stretch on the end of your training, that doesn't work at all. There have been many researches, and it's never been proven that works. It doesn't prevent injury. It doesn't do anything. What it does is, if for you mentally it relaxes you and you feel better, it's like a routine that you have, that's fine. But in terms of performance, of range of motion, that's not going to do any good. At least research showed this way.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So we have one very last question, which is going to be a short one, because Tim is asking, what high intensity exercises do you recommend and how often should we do it? So for Tim's question, I would actually refer him to the base training, right?
Yeah, of course. The base training is this is why we develop base training, so people can actually get these questions answered, and they have a set of exercises there that they can use. But also, like, be critical and have a personal approach to everything. It's impossible to make a base training drill that's going to be good for everyone. So you need to feel, like I said, you can have things scientifically measured, but you can also feel them pretty good. So base training is like a guideline and adapted to your needs. Maybe you will tweak some high intensities that we offer, or maybe you will tweak number of reps or how high you do them. It's how much you are motivated on a single day. You can do the same exercise, but with less intensity every day. So when I talked about the phases in a week, you don't have to. Some people do the same skill every day, but they don't do it with the same intensity and volume. So if I were to develop my power, I would go to weightlifting, and I'm going to lift on every single day, but I don't, because I want in the end to get, I need my whole system to change. I need my bones to restructure if I want to get to higher weights. But I will not do it at the same volume and intensity. I will, in the beginning of the season, I will have a lot of volume. In the end, I will have a lot of intensity. And on Monday, I will have, let's say, 98% of my PB or PR or 1RM or whatever. And on Tuesday, I will probably target 80%. Then on Wednesday, I will target 98 again. Then on Thursday, I will target 70. Then Friday, I will go for 95. Saturday, I will go for 75. And Sunday, I will probably fully rest or do auxiliary exercises. So, you know, have this in mind. Those are all guidelines, and for everyone is different, and it's depending a lot on how you sleep, where you sleep, what you eat, how fast do you recover, are you outdoors, are you working in dry conditions, in moist conditions. Respect your body before everything. So it's very easy to get overtrained, and in freediving things will come. Be patient. There's like, I know it sounds like everyone's saying that, but be patient and develop all the other physical skills, and freediving will come eventually.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for listening, and thanks for you, Vitomir, for this super amazing information.
All right. Thank you, Alisa. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, talk soon.
Bye-bye.